Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with veteran jazz trumpeter Mark Harvey. We caught up with him to talk about his latest CD coming out during a pandemic, 2020's Rite for All Souls. The Mark Harvey Group began as an 8-piece band back in 1969, playing hard-bop and jazz rock. These days, he is teaching and keeping up with the music. There are a lot of similarities to this new world in 2020 to the one that he began in back in 1969. He's got great stories. Get to know him.
Thanks for taking a minute out.
Sure.
So let's talk about your latest CD, Rite for All Souls. You know, it's coming out during a pandemic. You know, you're not going to be able to back it up live, but people will have more of a chance to listen to it. Talk to me about your feelings on this release.
Well, the fact that it's during the pandemic was totally caught us by surprise. We had we've been working on this for, well over a year, and had planned to bring it out, right about now, right about early July, and then everything started to fall apart, and so we still continue with our momentum to release the album and all of that. But we began to realize that actually some of the things that were germane back in the time of this recording in 1971 are still there. That is to say, social unrest and very turbulent times and very sort of unsettled times. And we would like to think that our music spoke to that time period almost 50 years ago, and we would like to think that it continues to speak to the time period right now.
Isn't it amazing how history does have a chance or does repeat itself? I mean, that we are actually going through that cycle again now?
I know, it's amazing.
So talk to me a little bit about, in this COVID-19 world, when did you start realizing, say, early to mid-March, that things were starting to kind of come to a halt?
Well, I'm also an academic person. I teach at MIT, and we were basically told about the middle of March that we had to clear out of our offices and everything was going to be going to an online teaching situation, which I had never done before. So that became quite a wake-up call. And it was really something that caught me, really off guard. Then in terms of the teaching, I had to scramble and manage to figure out how to do it. And I think I and many of my colleagues, we did figure it out and had a, fairly successful end of the term. But it was definitely a very, very different new world, different brave new world sort of situation.
So talk to me a little bit about your beginnings. How did jazz become a part of your life, kind of where you were born and raised?
Well, I was born and raised in Binghamton, New York, which is upstate New York, and had a very wonderful family and a very wonderful school system that had a lot of musical opportunities. And although my family was not at all oriented to jazz, for some reason I became interested, and at the age of 13 I bought my first record ever, and it would happen to be a Dizzy Gillespie and his big band from the late 1940s. So that sort of set me on a path of jazz interest, and also I think because it was Dizzy Gillespie, very sort of experimental and very really hardcore sort of jazz, you could say, from an early age. And then I was able to play in big bands in the school as well as at a local cultural center. And same thing when I went to college at Syracuse University. And by the time I came to Boston, which I came to go to graduate school at the BU School of Theology, I was starting to, once I got up here, starting to explore improvisation more, and then really got into the free jazz element.
So how did you end up at MIT? How is all of this working together to kind of satiate your creativity and who you are?
Well, I had been doing a little bit of teaching at a couple of smaller colleges in town, and I had been engaged in ministry with the arts, with the jazz community in Boston. And through that, I met John Harbison, who's a very well-known classical composer. And John was on the MIT faculty, and he had been doing jazz classes and had decided he wanted to move along and do some other things. So he and I knew each other, and he asked me if I would come over and do one jazz class, and so I did it. And after that, it just sort of grew exponentially, and I've been a full-time member there for quite a while.
So what do you like the best about being a musician?
Well, I think the ability to come up with creative ideas and then to express them to express them through a musical organization, whether it's a quartet like on our album here, or my large jazz orchestra, which is about 17 or 18 people, and then to see how that music, reaches out to people and gives them various kinds of uplift or healing or joy, and in many cases expressive of the whole range of human emotions.
So what was the first live jazz show you ever saw?
That's a good question. I have a feeling it might have been the Woody Herman Band, probably back around 1963. That was a wonderful version of his band. It had people like Bill Chase from Boston, actually, and Phil Wilson, who I later got to know as a friend, who teaches at the Berklee College of Music, and Sal Mystico, a whole wonderful array of musicians, and really just sort of a very exciting musical experience.
So we are going to get to the end of COVID-19, and we will get back to the stage and the audience. What do you hope both the musician and the audience realizes from this time away from music?
I hope they realize how vital it is to our human experience. I think everybody is already experiencing that. The lack of having a live performance situation, both for the performers and for the audience, I think is really starting to take a toll on people. At least we're getting that up in the Boston area through interviews with people and, statements that various people are making. So I hope that people really realize this is just an irreplaceable gift that we have, and we have to appreciate it and support it.
You had mentioned when this music came out in the 70s, a lot of the same things were going on, and obviously we're battling the same kind of demons. What do you hope happens from this, maybe on social fronts and artistic fronts, that really genuinely changes from all of this?
Well, I hope that people, the musicians particularly, realize they have a kind of a higher calling than just being entertainers, which was part of what was going on in the late 60s, early 70s. The impulse among many musicians, certainly the people I was associated with, was to say that we really would like to think that our music can help change society, and that's why we played so hard and so fervently and made the kind of commitments we did. And I would like to think that musicians these days are starting to get the idea that their music can do these kinds of things.
So everyone has a perception of you, your family, your friends, students, fans, but you're the one living your life. Who do you think you are?
Who do I think? That's a very good question. Well, I think I'm, at this point in my life, a fairly centered, focused individual who has a sense of what he's done, where he's been, and where he's trying to go at the present and for the future. And so I'm just trying to, make as much positive contribution to the world as I can.
So I know it's hard to say right now with the way the world is, but what's next for you? Any projects, anything that you're looking at down the way that might be coming up?
Well, that's a very good question. At the same time, we're releasing this quartet recording. I've got a big band recording with my Aardvark Jazz Orchestra coming out on the Leo record label, and that should be coming out very soon with international distribution. And that's got also many pieces that speak to our times. We have here in Boston a sculpture called the Robert Gould Shaw Memorial, one of the very first African-American regiments in the Civil War, led by a white colonel. And it's a wonderful sculpture by Augustus St. Gaudens. And I've written two pieces on this album that are inspired by that. And part of the conceit of one of them is called, which is called Faces of Souls, which is to say, what would happen if these African-American soldiers represented on this large sculpture, what if they came back through time? What if their spirits came back and looked at what was going on around them? What would their take on all of this be, and what would they think about the sacrifice they gave, given what the current situation is? So a piece like that, I hope, will reach out and speak to people and make people think.
So let's say you come to Kansas City and perform live. Talk to me a little bit about what a live experience would be.
Well, a live experience would be what we call the Aardvark experience in the big band, which is to say a very fine group of players. I consider them all virtuosos and all wonderful soloists as well as section players. And we bring our own particular energy and vigor and the way that we look at the world and look at the world of music. So I think you'd get a very, upbeat and interesting, joyful show right from the downbeat.
Right on. Hey, man, thank you for taking some time out for Neon Jazz today. Stay safe. Good luck with the new album. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Boston, New York, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Mark for his time, music, and stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, support the arts and enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.